super excited to host Matteo and Dimitri, and love. I'm big fan of first of all Speckle, and this interview I am like really excited and happy to host you guys. So first of all, like thanks a lot for your time to do this and all the work you're doing.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and you've been doing quite a good job with interviewing people around. It's an honor to be here as well. Thanks.
Appreciate it. So Matteo, I have a question for you first. Like, how
All
was
right.
the initial pitch of Dimitri when he talked about Speckle and how the product has pivoted along these years?
Ooh, what do you mean by first pitch? Is that when I discovered Speckle for the first time?
Yeah, like when he convinced you to join and do this. Yeah.
No, the thing,
There's a long story there.
yeah, the thing he didn't really even need a pitch. The product sold itself, and at the time I was working in another company, and I was actually working on a very similar in-house effort that was trying to achieve the same. So for me, it was enough seeing a video, and actually I think it was on YouTube of one of the very early versions of Speckle. I think it was called Speckle XYZ. Was it the name, right, Dim?
Yes, we resuscitated that domain name
We
this time
resuscitated
around.
that domain.
Yes.
And it was more of an online viewer for parametric grasshopper models, right? And then that evolved into more of a grasshopper to grasshopper interoperability solution. And I was working on something very similar. That also had Dynamo as part of the puzzle, and I was like, wow, that is open source. It's amazing. It's way more polished than what I have, but it doesn't, have a grasshopper integration. So we should definitely speak and collaborate and and merge these two ideas together. So that's what was my first, let's say, exposure to Speckle. And I didn't need any pitching.
And
It
when
was
was this? Like which
um,
year?
2017. I got a
2017.
strange message on Slack from a guy with a beard that I didn't know at the time, and that's how we kicked off. I think. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, 5 years. Okay. And Dimitri, like once you started developing Speckle, like what was the most like satisfactory moment when people started using it or a client feedback? What was the moment?
I think it's a mix, right? So for me, at the time, I was a Marie Curie researcher at UCL, and usually you're quite isolated in these research environments. So actually seeing Speckle being used in pragmatic ways, right, like boots on the ground, was very satisfying. And seeing taking it off from there. But actually, I think the most satisfying part was kind of the sense of community that was being created around essentially this little open source thing, right? Matteo joining, Luis Fraguada at the same time, and others. So I think both Matteo and me were very happy with the message that we managed to push through with open source in AEC, right?
Go- Got it. And I think like getting the community building around open source project is like a is crucial. So what is some like piece of advice for in that scope?
Oof.
Well, I
Well,
have
we have
a piece of,
many.
yeah, I think the first is it's not easy, right?
Yeah.
We've had people reaching out to us, how, could you share some advice? And it's not just a matter of, taking some code and, slapping an open source license on it. It takes much more. And I think where Speckle excelled is, thanks to the product itself, it's a product that people needed, that we won hearts and minds by helping them do what they wanted to do better and faster. And of course, being open source helped, but that's not really, how you create a community. Create a community by listening to people, by sharing what you're doing, by, helping them out. And it takes a lot of time and effort.
Yes, and actually not expecting much in return, right? Usually there's a very mercantile aspect when you share things, you expect something in return. You shouldn't with open source. You should just like by default, this is what we give you. How can we help? You know. So yeah, and it's definitely a lot of work. Like, I mean, we're still now doing it even more in a sense, and we've throughout this journey we've realized actually what it takes. At the beginning we're just an open source project going by standard open source rules, but then you know GitHub contributions are actually a huge barrier. Like GitHub
Mhm.
itself, let's say in Git, is a huge barrier to contributions sometimes. And we've learned that actually contributions don't come only in code, they come in feedback, they come in like telling what people like or what they don't like, and so on. And this feedback needs to be actively sourced. So it's like building a welcoming home. You never stop. It's like, I don't know, maybe running a pub in a sense. You always have to serve people and listen to them and make sure they're comfortable to actually speak with you, right?
Got it. And like
But
doing, sorry, go ahead.
no, and I just wanted to follow up on top of what Dim just said, which is, yes, community building and maintaining a community is a huge effort, but also we find that the community nowadays is one of our strongest assets and resources because we have continuous feedback, feature suggestions, bug reports that are immensely helpful to us, to the project, to the company. So we couldn't have done it all this way without the community that we have. And yeah, it's a big effort, but it's paying back. And when we saw the first community contributions coming in, it's really heartwarming to see. It's not just people using your product, but then eventually something comes back.
I see. And were there any like systems or automations in place for like community management which saved a lot of your time?
No, to be honest,
Yeah.
like we only have things of what not to do. I think I don't know. Luis started a Slack channel. It was Luis Fragua's idea, like, hey, dude, why don't you start a Slack channel, right? And I started a Slack channel, which is the worst place ever to build a community. And this is, a lesson learned after a couple of years. Like around 2020, we scuttled it because it's impossible to search more than 10,000 messages back, etc. I think it was also Luis who said, like, why don't you set up a Discord forum, right? Because like Neil has one. Let's do that as well. And then there was like the tension between Slack and Discord, right? But Discord actually is a very good place to interact with people. It's a bit less real time, but that also helps in maintaining the right kind of interfaces there. And yeah, I mean, we're doing plenty of other things on the side, like monthly community stand-ups. Well, quasi monthly when we don't forget that it's time for a community stand-up. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah. I have seen like some like community setting up like bots in place. Like okay, if you have like basic questions about this project, like the bot answers for it. Is there any like plans or things?
I think currently the search function in Discord is doing exactly that. We were tempted, Matteo, in the past, set up like some other kind of systems where people could upvote issues or like features that they want. I think there was an intention to do that at one point. Am I right, Matteo? But we just didn't have time. So the forum is quite flexible. We enjoy it a lot. It's because it doesn't, with real-time chat like Discord or Slack, you feel obliged to answer. In a quasi, there's a different contract there that you engage with people on, and that can be quite stressful. And we had these kind of stressful moments in the past, like, hey, why are you not replying to us, right? And it's like, because we're developing the product, right? And with the forum, we avoid all this stuff. There's a kind of, and the team as well, people, the engineers working on Speckle, they're more, sheltered. Because otherwise you just spend your whole day chatting to people, right? So
Yeah, and then ultimately, I think again to make a community work, you need these human interactions, right? If you had bots replying and picking up threads, then it wouldn't be as nice and welcoming as it might currently be.
true.
Got it. And speaking of frustrations, I know like developing an open source project is one thing, and there's a different satisfaction you get with people adopting it and impact. But there's also like technical debt where new libraries are being upgraded, and you like make those kind of decisions. So, what were some like tough decisions you had to make or tech frustrations?
I think, this kind of bit rot, let's say, is valid for open source and closed source software alike, in a sense. there are like particular annoying moments. For example, I don't know, a library inside the Speckle server became deprecated. We had to work around it, or like the upgrade was not straightforward, and you lose time. But that's all right. That's part of life. Open source actually makes it to a certain extent easier because we actually can contribute fixes to other libraries that we're using, or Matteo can reach out to the developers of Avalonia, for example. Hey, this doesn't work like this. Can we try something? So it actually helps a lot. We won't go down with the, let's say, software vendors per se. That's those APIs are a completely different story. So you can see Mateo's paint smile. I'm sharing it. So
Wait, you answered it as if it was a smooth ride.
it is a smooth ride. Yeah.
I
It,
mean, that there are difficulties, and I think maybe one that we encountered today is also the fact that we, by developing Speckle, we have more of a web part of things. The web, the server, the front end, they're very easy to update and release. So whenever there's an update, we can ship it. Everybody who visits the website gets the latest and freshest copy. It's not the same when dealing with the connector. So anything that happens on
mm,
desktop, that's where maybe we find most of the struggles at the moment. And it's not just the integration with the vendors, that's a separate topic, but being able, to constantly release new versions of our connectors. There's no guarantee that at the end of the day, users will update and always have, the latest version installed. There's a lot of friction that we found, with the corporate setups where people have firewalls, VPNs, proxies of sorts, or IT policies that prevent them to install or use
yes,
correctly some of our products. So that's maybe where most of the frustrations in terms of
true.
development that we found. DLL Health, we have a Revit connector, but if somebody else develops something that uses parts of our code, and then these DLLs are shared in the same machine, and some things are out of date, then we have
Yeah.
conflict. So that's where maybe we found most of the frustrations and uh, and issues so far.
Yeah, and actually, to echo what Matteo said, like distribution is very important, right? And this is the connector distribution per se, desktop software distribution is a massive PITA pain in the behind. Um, and there's nothing we can do about it. Like we also sometimes like just I think yesterday we got a random email from IT department of a architectural company that we didn't know they use Speckle. There's no relationship, but then we had suddenly like this whole Excel sheet of questions that we have to fill in about security and stuff and blah blah blah. And that's replicated. So it's not always easy.
Got it.
Yeah,
I see. So there's also like good I would say onboarding challenge for whatever software you use, and like each country specific, discipline specific, there are like different challenges and how to work around it.
yeah, and it's a thing we underestimated maybe at the beginning, and we're still trying to find the smoothest solution to, right? Like code signing, for example, like it's Matteo spent poor Matteo. I remember he was on endless calls with this company that would provide a certificate so that we could sign our installers. They wouldn't be flagged up as suspicious. And that was a huge time investment, and it's not nothing to do with actually the quality of your code or with any product
any
feature that the end
any
user
value.
enjoyed.
Exactly.
Yes, so there's
Yeah,
all that operational side that can be tricky.
I don't think as well. Yeah.
good. And like it's very rare to see like such open source development in AEC. And I want to touch upon like how do you make like the business value and like make a successful startup out of open source. So lessons learned along the way.
Maybe
Phew,
the first thing
where
to mention is it's true, open source in AC is a new thing, but it's not new in other fields. And actually, if you look at some of the most successful exits and IPOs of the last few years. They involve technological companies that are open source. So we are not really inventing something new. We're following the footsteps of many other successful companies. Just very recently, GitHub IPO'd very successfully. There's many others that we can mention. We're just
Sentry is valued at 1 billion plus, and it's a fully open source company. There's many, yeah.
what we do. Yeah, we're just following on in their footsteps and trying to reapply some of their lessons learned in AC. And what we are facing is, of course, the AC industry is not really in many circumstances not ready to deal with
Mm.
open source, to adopt it. There's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of ignorance as well. We've been asked, but is an open source insecure because all the code is out there? And these are a bit myths in a way that that keep
We're
dragging, and
fighting against,
we're just fighting
yeah.
against, and we're trying to educate as well as part of our journey. It's not just creating a product and releasing code, but it's also trying to educate people around open source, what it is, what it means, and how it can help us all collectively.
Yeah, and funnily enough, I mean, this is when Matteo says educated might seem a bit like kind of, snobbish of us, but it's not that. It's like, the everybody gets it, but then there are some random levels in a hierarchy which are maybe from a different generation than us who don't know that actually their phone runs on open source, right? If they have an Android phone, basically that's open source, and they trust that with their bank account details and their whole life and so on. So we're just going there by example, and we're doing what we're doing, and it's fine. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, and the
and
example that I like to make every time when we talk about this is, think about some of the largest tech corporations out there, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, they're heavy competitors, but they, at the end of the day, they're collaborating on several open source projects that they initiated. And Microsoft itself, they were so opposed to open source back in the day, but now there's one of the largest open source maintainers and contributors that you have. So the game
yeah,
is changing, and AEC needs to catch up with the, with the rest of the tech world.
I have my reservations around Microsoft. They're doing some shenanigans with the .NET project. They've done some weird decisions recently. But yeah, you know, the writing's anyway on the wall. There's no future without open source. Open source is in every stack, and it will just keep growing. Uh, yeah,
Especially if you're creating infrastructure, and I think Speckle is data digital infrastructure for the AEC. If you're writing building infrastructure, it has to be open source. There's no other way. And the fact that we are still relying on proprietary files is just silly. Why would you store such valuable information? You spend so much time curating and producing, designing this building, and you put in a proprietary file that you won't be able to open without specific license or specific software. It's just ridiculous.
Mhm.
mm, yeah.
And what were the business model options you had? Uh,
It's very simple. We don't know yet. I mean, our main business model right now revolves around SaaS, where we provide essentially turnkey Speckle servers to whoever doesn't want to care about maintaining and having them secure and backups and so on. Um, and I think here it's key, like you asked earlier a bit, like how do you start a business around open source? The key is to have the right partners that understand this and that can essentially guide you around what will be a very custom journey, right? There's no recipe. There are patterns which you can essentially try and apply, like Matteo was saying, GitLab and so on. But let's say you're of the mill investors that are used to, Uber for dogs or whatever. Those are maybe not your audience, right? So
Wait, wouldn't you use Uber for dogs?
I don't know. Does that even exist? I just spit it out.
I see. So right now is like SaaS model, and you're like testing and figuring it out along the way, like other opportunities, or yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
yeah. I
simple
mean,
evolution. Sorry,
yeah.
one simple evolution of that could be, a multi-tenanted instance of Speckle, like GitHub, right? So you could create your own organization, your own accounts, have your own thing, and having that, there could be a cost associated, but we would always have, a fully open source version of Speckle that anybody can take and use.
Yeah. And like, who are like the like if you were to analyze your users in the market, like this is kind of like early adopters, and as is there a particular uh, category which tends to be more experimental with Speckle?
Obviously, yes. There is the classic computational designer persona, which they see Speckle and they leave very flattering comments on LinkedIn from what we've seen recently, in a sense. And they are our champions. We've seen again now that we're investing a bit more into, let's say, more accessible features, not to just, let's say, designers per se. We've seen a lot of waves coming from, let's say, managers and so on. So we are kind of enlarging the demographic that Speckle is catering to. Like Bilal made recently a tutorial on how to embed Speckle in Notion, and that like sparked off a whole new like craze about, okay, we can make BIM dashboards in Notion, interactive with issue tracking and so on. So that's obviously a different audience.
And I think this is the user persona that we have, so people who use the end product. But we've seen a huge adoption also on behalf of developers. We've seen developers of existing, architecture engineering organizations that they just find Speckle as a solution for automation by using our SDKs, APIs, viewer, permission management, and all this stuff. They already have an amazing base in which they can build their own applications. So when and this is a bit of like a second aha moment after the interoperability, they realize, oh, with Speckle, I can create this app that leverages data comes from Blender, Rhino, and Revit at the same time. I don't have to create three separate plugins. I can create one that works for all of them, like the Carbon tool that we had a few examples being developed, other dashboard, other automation dashboard, that can build on top of Speckle. And it's not just individuals in other AC organizations. We've seen startups use Speckle a bit as a backend to their own product, which is pretty cool.
And other European research projects in VR and AR and stuff. So it's, yeah.
That's amazing. I was like investigating earlier, like using like metaverse has this interoperability issues, each like Web3 metaverse for say. So using this like model format agnostic approach in NFT in
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, it would be cool. I think we did understand actually that rather recently Speckle is relevant not only to AEC or like there is a big world of 3D data, right? Which, however you look at it, we cater to it. Right now, given our backgrounds and our areas of expertise, we focus on AEC. We want to saturate and make sure that there is a viable open source alternative to the proprietary ecosystems out there. And once that's in place, we are happily and opportunistically looking, let's say, horizontally.
Got it. And like I see like Speckle is quite diverse and talented team. So can you share a bit about the culture at Speckle and your hiring process?
Sure.
We're the wrong people to ask about the culture. You should ask like Easy, who just like commented a poodle and a car in the chat. Like I am still trying to decode those two emojis. Uh, but yeah, culture, like we're still a small team per se. And when we started, we hired from the community a lot, like Easy, our first joiner. She worked with Speckle before. And, like, I don't know, a couple of years later, two crazy dudes say, hey, Easy, do you want to work for this crazy thing? We just started a company. She had the courage to say yes. So hats off. And things, it's my dog Uber. Okay, thank you, Easy. um, so we prioritize community a lot when it comes to hiring, actually, and the motivation is very important there because this is how we ensure that we solve the right problem rather than we're not the type to say, okay, here's a spec sheet and send it off to a bunch of off-the-mill developers to do things. As we grow, this obviously changes a bit. So now we're focusing quite a lot on like bringing some, let's say, more experienced or seasoned programmers without necessarily having AC experience on board. And we're also developing the community team. And at the beginning, it's a very small crew, so you can be very flexible. Now we're having a bit of a more processed uh, way when we interview people.
Yeah. And I mean,
Usually,
I
it's
think
yeah. Go ahead.
no, I just want to mention one of the biggest challenges that we have, but that is also an opportunity, is the fact that we are fully distributed as a company. So Speckle was founded during the first wave of COVID, and we didn't really have a choice. So we've been fully remote since then. We are, I think, 16 total headcount, including the two of us, and we don't have an office space. So that adds quite a few challenges, as you can imagine, in terms of communication, collaboration. But it turns out that almost everybody in the team kind of likes the fact they don't have to commute, likes the fact they have flexibility to work whenever they want, from wherever they want. And how we compensate, the lack of human interaction is through quite a few different initiatives. The first are the retreats. We try to have in-person retreat every 6 months at least, and that's a good opportunity for people to, especially new joiners, to see who their colleagues are, how do they behave, their personalities,
How
aside
tall
from
they are.
how tall they are. That's quite shocking
you know.
in the last retreat. We also actually just announced today a new initiative that we actually was quite inspired by GitLabs, which allows anybody in the company to decide to work and meet someone else from the team. They can pick a location and a project they want to work on, and they just meet there and have some in good quality in real life person time to work together. So, and aside from that, we have daily stand up. So every day we all meet together. Uh, we just have a few chats together. Then we split. Every team has their own detailed stand ups. We also have quite a few games and social activities we play from time to time. But this is a bit how we're trying to cope with the lack of physical interactions on a regular basis.
Yeah, like especially like on talking about initiatives, like I think you organized like a 1 day conference where you invited a lot of speakers. That was good. Recently you organized a hackathon which was quite
Mhm.
interesting. So like testing out this ideas and like bringing together like people who are passionate in this space, it's also helps like breed like new generation, like okay, this is how like things can be done as well. So uh you briefly talked about like how like you guys do stand up and work down, like I'm curious, like how does a day in your life look like?
It's the wrong time to ask that question because it's been rather hectic for both of us recently, to be honest.
Well,
Um,
spoiler alert: lots of meetings, lots of emails.
yeah, be careful what you wish for, huh, Matteo? We've learned that lesson now. No, but we can describe. Let's put that aside. I can describe my ideal day, right? So it doesn't happen very often recently. But my ideal day would be, some internal team coordination with what's needed. Like if Alex needs us to untangle some extra stupid conventions that we have around our 3D data. So a bit of focused, let's say, product discussions. And then I would actually like to get my hands a bit dirty. And then possibly once a week have some like good external meetings, right? Um, yes, yeah, don't look at me. Yeah, okay, Mateo's laughing.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
to be honest,
you, you probably know Mayor. We're both kind of have a technical background, so we're not the best when it comes to
yes.
to doing business development. Meeting with others. Ultimately, it's part of the
We're not doing
job
it too
description.
badly, Mateo.
And
We manage,
well,
right?
well,
Yeah.
we'll let others judge us there.
Yeah.
But you guys did successful fundraising, so congratulations on that. And
Thanks.
uh, must be a lot of I'm guessing the context you're talking is a lot of investor meetings you had in past months to get it done.
Those were time boxed. So actually, it was for technical founders, it's always going to be a painful process. So it was a bit painful. but then it was over really fast, actually. We were actually, there was a huge difference from our pre-seed raise to essentially our seed raise now. Like, I think it took us maybe 3 4 months at the beginning, and then in our first raise, and within 3 weeks we closed essentially our seed round. It went actually faster than we expected. There's a lot of interest out there. I think 3D data becomes a bit of a keyword and a kind of another niche, you know,
It's
that
something that
gets invested.
I think it's quite simple. What we're building is something that doesn't exist out there. This interoperability or data layer that is open and accessible, and it's extremely needed. And this is simple. We can see so many efforts that in the past started by different companies to create these interoperability solutions just by exchanging JSON files. We saw, I don't want to mention a name, but some of the companies we worked in the past, they had 3 or 4 different efforts in the same company to do the same thing. That we started at different offices. So it's clearly, clearly a need to get around these boundaries that were, erected by some of the software vendors out there. And Speckle is probably the only solution there that is open source and is flexible, uh, and hence the interest.
Yeah, especially as we are moving, like a lot of people are speculating that our websites are spatial, our experience would be like uh, multiverse, I would say, and for that metaverse background, having the spatial, but also like people are working on open metaverse standards, and like should we use GLTF or USDC, and like as the model challenges. So
Yeah, those are, I mean, they're good challenges to have, to be honest. And I think the metaverse per se and like kind of 3D assets, they have their own technical challenges when it comes to how they're stored, serialized, and, exchanged about, right? And ingested by metaverse applications or Unity or Unreal or game engines and so on. And that side of the world has been much more advancing much faster, and the standards are much better there. Like they're much more optimized, they're quite efficient. So it's a lesson that we're learning from, right?
right. So I have this open question. If you had like unlimited time and resources, what one feature would you work when you wake up tomorrow morning?
Ha, tricky one. Well, probably an open source, a properly open source MIT licensed like proper geometry kernel, just
Yeah,
like Rhino,
an
but open
authoring tool,
source.
right?
Yeah, yeah, starting from the kernel. But yes, yeah, I think that's something that I think you know because it's like there's decades of experience. This was just, yeah, there's decades of experience behind any of these 3D kernels, and there's like not any kind of experience, heavy math PhD level experience, and it's really keeping AC behind in a sense, because there is when you build stuff on top of something. Currently, if you need a geometry kernel, you end up enriching a closed source ecosystem, right? This is kind of what Speckle, changed on the data layer side of things. So for us to kind of complete this picture, what Matteo said, like you know, an authoring tool would be amazing.
Yeah, and that's also why, at least at the current state, we are trying to stay away as much as possible from authoring, editing geometry within Speckle. Speckle is purely a data platform where data flows. You can analyze, you can process, you can display it as much as you want. You can bring it back into other software, but we're staying away from being able to edit and author for these very reasons. And who knows, maybe one day we'll have the time and resources to dedicate to it, but not just yet.
Nice.
And in the meantime, we're actually very happy that Dion Moult and the Blender Beam crew has picked up that mantle. To be honest, it's humbling to see what they are doing there. So
Yeah. Yeah, I always like often see all the updates and meetups like Go Open Beam and like Dion is
Yes.
doing amazing work. So yeah, moving on, like tell us one thing which most people don't know about you but would be surprised to know about that fact.
Like on a personal level or on a professional level?
I'll keep it open. Whatever you wanna share.
Oof. I mean, where to start? I'm joking. Surprising fact.
Maybe I can go first and say my first
Mm.
ever coding language was ActionScript. So that's do you know what ActionScript is, Mayor? It's
No.
a test to see
Ha.
how young you
Yes. That's what it devolved to, at least for now.
are. So you're probably familiar with Flash,
Yep.
websites built in
Yeah, yeah.
Flash. ActionScript is a language that was a language through which you could, program some of these interactions. So I think that's how I started coding altogether. Just by using the visual editor, would create these, Flash animations, and then I figure out, oh, if you put a little piece of code behind these the keyframes, you can say move to this other keyframe and then create this animation. And I had actually built my first websites in Flash and Flex then, and yeah, that's how it started.
Macromedia. Yes, that was then killed. And it's funny, like I have exactly the same background. Maybe it was not my first language, but definitely my second language, and definitely the one I remember most fondly. Action script, really. I mean, my graduation project from high school was like a very crappy 3D engine in action script. Those were the days. Yeah. Anyway.
I have another fun fact for you, Mayor. My first ever line of C sharp was a Revit plugin. And you're like,
Whoa.
if you gotta learn .NET, maybe writing a Revit plugin is not the best way, right?
No. Okay. I'm not escaping, am I? No, we're not
No,
moving to
no,
the
no.
next question. Damn it.
I'm waiting.
Okay. Surprising thing. I mean, one thing that recently like keeps on surprising me recently is that I have a 3-month-old baby, and that's like still a continuous like wow moment in my life. I guess it might be for others. Um, what else? I don't know. I used to enjoy descriptive geometry, like in a very sadomasochistic way. I really liked
uh,
intersecting cones and like
I
by
have one.
hand and
I have
yeah.
one for you, Dim.
Oh shit.
Voronoi. Do you wanna?
Oh my god. Yes, so back in the days when Grasshopper came out, it didn't have a Voronoi component, right? Which I took it as a personal affront. And I found online this, I think it was from Open Cascade, or was it? No, I think it was called this Qhul library. Anyway, from the family of Open Cascade stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so I found this library online that you would, it would do 3D Voronoi for you. So like one of my first Grasshopper plugins that I developed was essentially a wrapper around this Qhul library that would make 3D Voronoids. And that was like kind of maybe like a year before actually David Rotten, provided the legit 3D Voronoi component in Grasshopper. Yeah. Yeah, actually I used to brag about that. Anyway, yes.
That's
You're
interesting.
probably saying prior
Yeah.
to Speckle.
I,
Actually, that Voronoi did that component did get me on quite a couple of workshops around Europe. So
all right. So takeaway for people watching is if you have any component which you are deeply passionate, develop it. You never know.
definitely, yes. And don't start with the Revit API. Like
If you're
the,
if you're learning .NET, no.
the
I see. If you get a chance to do a university course, which topic would you teach and what would be the core contents?
ha.
Mm,
Okay. Matteo
that's a
was waiting
tricky
for
one.
me to reply first.
Okay. I need time to think.
Okay. Um, for me, it's quite easy. I think it would be a mixed program that would so I would call it like design communication or digital design communication because, that's what I did the fucking PhD in. So like I just need to repeat it, right? In a sense. But I found that like in the industry right now, like kind of the biggest problems that we have are not necessarily around lack of skills with not people not knowing how to code and so on. These are things that, you'll never be able to make everybody in the industry code. That's a
Mhm.
lost cause. But you can make everybody in the industry like understand how to use digital tools in a very, let's say, cooperative way. And I think that right now the biggest barrier to communication within AC is kind of the whole semi-toxic environment in which, you just lob IFC files over the fence and like, you wash your hands and that's, job done. This is what I would like to change, and this is a big cultural change. So that's why, uni would be a perfect place to start doing it.
So
Yeah,
the
and
content
maybe
would be like formats of data exchange or or it's like more philosophical.
but it can be like it would be grounded in quite some very simplistic theory. Actually, I mean simplistic in some very simple theory, and yeah, would also have a practical aspect. And maybe like teach people how to write the server in Node.js. I think that would be cool as well. I don't know. I'm all over the place. It's not ready for this one.
But I'm a bit short of ideas, so we'll probably just have a follow-up course to Dimitri's where I just teach Speckle. And that's because there are so many moving parts in Speckle as a platform. If you start from, connectors, the basic concepts of our SDKs, the web, just how
Mm.
to use it as a user, but the release process, deployment is there's a lot to cover, and I think enough for a university course at the end of the day.
Yeah, true. Like, I mean, yeah, you're spot on. We need a Speckle uni.speckle.systems. Oh, yes. Yeah,
Coming
because
at
there's many.
UCL next semester.
Yeah. Yeah, there's too many moving parts in Speckle, but it's what it is.
I see. Is there any like technical or business book which made a big impact in your life?
Hmm.
Well, technical book, yeah, I have one, The Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, and it made a big impact in my life just because like I started it maybe like 3 or 4 times, never actually went past the third chapter or something like this. So it's impactful in the sense that it weighs me down, right? I do not know enough Lisp. Um, business book, I think we're inspired a lot by Amazon and stuff coming from there, no?
Hmm. Yeah, that's one that I read quite recently, working backwards. Uh, it kind of had it's very helpful and insightful in how they work. So really, just again, learning from how other successful companies have been doing things is super useful.
Mm. And I have one recent one that actually makes a lot of sense. Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows, if I'm not mistaken. It really like describes the fallacies when you think in like simple action and reaction terms, and it kind of guides you in starting to think around feedback loops and how this articulates pretty much everything. Yeah, that's cool.
Interesting.
Also, Nicolas Nassim Taleb is a super fun read, so I always recommend him if you can stomach his tone. So,
There's also some very good books from the team at Basecamp. They also, are they're not a startup. I think they bootstrapped everything, but they managed to create some very successful softwares and apps. So they have a rework. I think I read another book on working remotely. They're all quite good and recommended.
Awesome. I see you have like a library set up in the background, Dimitri.
yeah, bah, it's half of it because moving houses and cities, it's not. There's more here. I read a lot of science fiction, actually, to be honest. I total trash anything that has spaceships, lasers, or fantasy, elves, anything. So that's what I mostly read, to be honest. Yeah.
Got it. Who's your role model? Like both of you.
Oof. Role models. They're always tricky. I find that if you have a role model, you're always like you limit yourself a bit.
Hmm.
So per se, I don't really have a role model right now.
Yeah, the same is for me. I prefer, taking, bits and pieces from different personalities or leaders, or,
Yeah.
that, I think are, I share and appreciate, but there's no one who is really, perfect, or, that I feel like I should follow 100%.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, like any like few of these personalities which inspires you, like few figures or
Man, there's a bunch, like, people from the open source community sticking it out and, like, putting their lives on the line and, essentially in keeping alive the open source dream and keeping it pure. There's, ethical business leaders. There's, you know, the Ukrainian president right now. Like, I mean, there's an endless amount of people you can take inspiration from, right? And it's very humbling in a sense. That's why I also choosing just one, it would make
Mm.
a huge
yeah.
disfavor to many others in a sense.
Do you have, Mayor, a someone in specific, a
Uh,
role model?
you put me on the spot. Like I also agree like with all of you guys. Like I take like piss from like I I like Jobs' way of like vision and marketing. I like Elon's like technical approach, entrepreneurial.
Hmm.
Then uh few podcaster Joe Rogan and like some technical AI YouTubers. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
All right. I have like another question, which is like, is there anything you wish you would have done differently in life? We are going more philosophical and open-ended here,
Yes, I
Ooh.
can see, I can see, I can see the abstraction level increases. Yes. I'm waiting for Matteo.
Oof. I mean, the classic answer here is I wish I bought more Bitcoins when I was younger. um, but no, I mean, I personally feel like, you know, nobody had, perfect, perfect life choices, but at the end of the day, I'm happy where I am, and so I think, whatever I've done must have contributed in a way or another, whether they were good or bad decisions, because, bad decisions and mistakes, they help you sometimes even more the good decisions, and doing the right things, because then you learn on the during the process. So quite happy, and I would say probably wouldn't change anything, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same track with Matteo. Like, there's no spilled milk, and if I look back, like on my life, it's all been a series of good and bad decisions. But as long as you can articulate those in a coherent narrative for yourself, you're good to go, right? And that's that's reassuring in a sense because you're not afraid to fail anymore, right?
Yeah, and I think that's very important what you're saying. I think, as a personality of being quite daring, I don't know if the right word, but, maybe jumping and doing things that others, would be more afraid of. So when I was younger,
Like ice climbing. Matteo is like totally crazy. He does these crazy climbs in the mountains that I'm afraid that I'm gonna.
only me,
Anyways,
yeah, only
yes.
sometimes. No, but as I was a young student, going to live and work abroad, these things that not everybody decides to do, and those small leaps of faith that you take, that eventually bring you somewhere. So, I would have said I have regrets. Maybe if it wasn't the, daring at the time when I decided to do these things, or even just deciding with Dimitri to leave stable jobs and start a venture. It's not something that
Yeah.
many people would choose to do because they like the comfort uh, of, their work. So really taking a step, leaving your comfort zone, I think it's very important, and that's why I feel like I currently don't have regrets. So,
Take the leap.
Yeah, Yeah, and in a sense, like we were lucky enough to, we're privileged in a sense. Whatever leaps we took them because we could, not because we were forced to, right? So there's other people out there, anonymous, right, who are forced into taking leaps,
Mhm.
and they are much more brave than us in a sense. So
I see. And like for AEC tech entrepreneurs listening this, like what are some gaps or problems yet to be solved in the in AEC space through open source or through other products development?
oof, you tell us. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't matter. Like, if you have the initiative to do something inside AEC to try and like shift the needle in a what you think is a better direction, just do it. It doesn't matter what right now. The industry is really needs this kind of energy, right?
Yeah,
However it's deployed.
and it's easy to get maybe uh, sidetracked or influenced by some of these buzzwords that we have out, but there's a lot of real world problems that need solutions, and nothing is currently available. So just even starting simple, real concrete problems that people face on a day to day is probably the best way to start. And then yes, if you can add some machine learning, AI, metaverse in it, why not? That's inevitably going to be a strong part of our lives very soon. But starting simple is always a good way as well.
Yeah. On a personal note, what are your thoughts about blockchain in AEC?
I mean, I think we can see from a bit the whole NFT buzz, right? That there's clearly a need of being able to verify, uniquely ownership, uh, and this smart contract are eventually going to be a thing in AC as well. Now, I think being still everything quite analog. We still deliver PDFs in many situations. That's a bit of a blocker to having this properly implemented, but eventually it's going to happen for sure.
Yeah, and like following from what Matteo said, maybe this is one advice I would give to, let's say, AC entrepreneurs is like, if you dream about the future, don't forget the present, and like designing the bridge from the present to that future that you're dreaming is as important as the future that you're dreaming. So I think, that applies to, in a sense, blockchain as well, right?
I
Yeah.
see. And like we see like all these articles of like uh, AEC industry not like paying fairly to employees or like especially architecture industry.
Hmm.
Is there any way you think we can like have fair payment or better payment, like looking and taking inspiration from the tech industry?
You know who you should interview on this topic? Shane Berger. Um, he has much more educated opinions than us on how this is possible and how this can be done. It's a shame what's happening right now. It's a economy of, let's say, kind of labor that's very antiquated in its system, and there's not much incentive right now currently to shift to a more, let's say, high paid working model. As long as architects will bill for time, this is how things will be. So I'm unsure like what examples like or what you could replicate from the tech industry. Definitely not the salaries for sure. So
So
yeah.
no
And
solution
there's
yet.
no solution yet, and then though like it's a problem that I sometimes, I don't know, even with my girlfriend I discuss quite a lot, like well-being within architecture, like from the level of a uni, like you've seen the Bartlett report, maybe what came out there, and like all the unpaid internship bonanza, all that stuff. The whole industry has a bit of a problem when it comes to being okay with itself, so to say. um, I don't have a solution, no.
You want to add any thoughts, Matteo?
No, I mean, I have limited experience. As Dimitri was saying,
He
maybe
was lucky.
I've been in one of these studios, and I was lucky not to experience it firsthand, but I've seen others, how they were treated and some of the conditions, and it I wouldn't never go back there, and clearly something has to change. But I don't know what the solution could be, honestly. It's a change that might have to start from, I don't know, even our education system. I guess even there's a lot of what's the right word, but of exploitment of students. I remember deadlines where everybody had to stay up super late, and these professors who would tell you to change everything today before the final deadline. So it's rooted back from back down from academia, and that's where maybe the change has to start.
Yeah. One more content for the course you guys teach.
Yes, possibly, indeed, yes. Yeah, but that now we're defining a whole university, right? We will have essentially well-being classes as well as like architecture studio. Yeah,
Speckle University.
then followed by the Speckle masterclass. Yes.
I see. Because like people who learn coding, then there's also like challenge of industry to retain talent because then they have
Mm,
alternatives, right?
yeah, I mean, from let's say the old crew, from our let's say generation of people who are like the grasshopper wizards, the computational designers, it's like very few of them are still actually within a practice, right? They spread out. Like Andrew Human works at Hypar, Robert now is at Omniverse. Many other examples, right? Like the whole Outer Labs crew and the Flux diaspora. People just, if they have the chance, they exit the industry in a sense. And I
Yeah.
agree, talent is not retained. So we've hired a bunch of them. So like, I mean,
All right. I think it's like 1 hour mark. So, is there anything which we didn't discuss in the interview and you'd like to share on that note?
hmm,
Maybe one key takeaway that we touched briefly on, is the whole open source aspect, and being collaborative, sharing. I think this is the most important thing that we can start to do now, and that would have an almost immediate effect. So we see a lot of companies being super concerned about the IP of some of the code, or even Grasshopper scripts, that they've developed that it could take 2 minutes to replicate. And I think that's really holding us back as a industry as a whole to progress. So of course, as Dion would say, go open source,
go
and
open bin. Yes.
open being open source. That's the right path.
Yeah, sharing is caring, any kind of sharing. So, in a sense, even Mayor, what you're doing with these interviews is a perfect example on how to share and how to crack open these black boxes that exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always wonder like the during the AEC Tech hackathons, people like from all over the firms come collaborate on ideas, but it's like not like scalable, or like people don't sustain it, and then people go back to their individual day job. And what if like we decide once in a month or a year, like this devs from this or computational designers from all these firms just to come together, and either they can donate monetary or time hours. Like there are ways we can boost the ecosystem.
Hmm.
True. Yeah, it's a tough sell to management. I'll give you that for sure. A lot of people will have trouble. Like, hey, there's this cool conference I really want to go to. It's a week. I need the flights paid, but it would be definitely cool.
Right. I think like this was amazing interview, so insightful to know your thoughts and journey. I really appreciate and wish all the luck for Speckle.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Meyer.
lot, me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
Same.
pleasure.
Hope to see you guys in person someday.
That would
Yes,
be great. Yes.
eventually.
Yeah. Bye bye.